they don't want. If we get everyone else vaccinated, 70% yung natawag na herd immunity, maprotektahan yung 30% na hindi magpabakuna. Oo.
Diyan ang paglaom, sudungang kaugmaon sa kanaw-kanaw. Sugantang pagbangon, dungan natong sugato na bagong adlaw. Karon ang panahon, busa magpabakuna ta. Kini ang pagpanggata sa usag-usag. Padayon usa ka komunidad kontra sa COVID pabakuna. Di na nato dugayon, di na panumbalingon na kabala ka. Ali magkuyog na, dungan natong pandayon ang nangagunom na mga damputa. Mabalik pa ang tanan kung magkaiyos sa pusa. Magpabakuna ta, hindi ang pagpanggata sa usag-usag. Padayon usa ka komunidad kontra sa COVID pabakuna. Karon ay layo na.
Invite na ko ang mga tao nga magpabaksin sila.
I encourage everyone to get vaccinated.
Invite mo tanan nga to take the opportunity to have a vaccine. Free na tanan sa worries or sa anxiety na to about this pandemic which is the COVID-19.
The best vaccine is the one that is available.
Diyan ang paglaom, sudungang kaugmaon ta. Higala busa magpabakuna ta.
Now that we have the vaccines here, please do avail of the vaccine to end this pandemic.
God Almighty, thank you for bringing us together during this unprecedented and challenging time. We ask that as we move forward as a community into the next normal, you give us the strength, patience, and wisdom needed to overcome these trials and rise above the pandemic. We pray for our present-day heroes who are on the front lines fighting against the virus. Those who have become sick and those who have died, may they have eternal rest. For those of us who are holding on to hope, please give us the grace to never give up. Dearest God, heal our land. Amen.
You might have heard of the term DRRM being used before, but what does it actually mean? We know that natural hazards such as typhoons, earthquakes, and landslides can happen at any time. The question to ask is not when will disaster strike, but how prepared are we? Disaster risk reduction and management in the Philippines aligns to this framework based off of Republic Act 10121, also known as Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010. This framework serves as a guide to how we prevent and prepare for a disaster before it happens, as well as how we respond to and rehabilitate communities affected by disaster. RAFI's Humanitarian Disaster Preparedness and Response Program aligns its initiatives with this DRRM framework to support communities in their disaster readiness and resilience. Prevention and mitigation in the context of DRRM is the avoidance or limitation of adverse impacts of disaster. Examples of these include appropriate policies, ordinances, and laws, risk assessment, and disaster-resilient infrastructure. These efforts can prevent the adverse effects of a disaster or at least minimize its impact on communities. Preparedness refers to capacitating communities and individuals to effectively anticipate, respond to, and recover from the impacts of disaster. Preparedness efforts include trainings, hazard mapping, community organizing, and education campaigns. Being prepared means you'll know what to do if and when disaster strikes. Response is the actions taken during or immediately after a disaster in order to save lives, reduce impacts to health, ensure public safety, and meet the basic needs of those affected. Swift response helps save lives, property, and the environment. Recovery and rehabilitation after a disaster restores and improves appropriate facilities, livelihood, and living conditions of a disaster-affected community. Following the idea of Build Back Better, efforts focus on prevention and mitigation for the next disaster, and so the cycle continues. While we can't control naturally occurring hazards, we can take steps to mitigate and prevent disaster and prepare ourselves and our communities for response. Are you disaster ready?
Paayong hapon kanatong tanan, and thank you to all who are tuned in for joining us here today on Restart 2.0 episode 5. So RAFI's Restart webinar series aims to provide practical information that will help our community not only survive but thrive in the new normal. So welcome everyone. For all of us who are tuned in, maybe you want to comment in the comment section down below where you're watching from. You can also feel free to share this live webinar to all of your friends on Facebook, so that they can also learn about the importance of preparedness. So let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Jackie Clavin. I work for the Ramona Boitis Foundation Incorporated, also known as RAFI. So as I mentioned, the Restart webinar series is aligned with RAFI's vision of touching people and shaping the future. So in this series, we cover a variety of topics with subject matter experts to discuss how we can be best prepared and move forward into the new normal. So we want to empower our viewers with information so that we can become more aware and more confident as we move forward during this pandemic. So you may not know that July is National Disaster Resilience Month in the Philippines, and it serves as a really good time to take a step back and ask ourselves, how prepared are we if and when disaster strikes? So if you think back to last year, you might remember that many of us were caught off guard with the onset of the pandemic, with all of the restrictions and lockdowns that were put into place. And we were just not as prepared as we could have been, So this led to things like panic buying, to inavailability of essential goods, people being stranded in certain localities, not being able to go back to, where their home provinces are, and really having to just cope up and adjust to the reality of the pandemic in a very short amount of time. So at least now things have leveled out just a bit, and we have already begun to start operating in the new normal of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we know a little bit better, and we'll have to ask, what are the other precautions that we have to take as we move forward when the next disaster or crisis occurs, right? So Rafi has a humanitarian disaster and preparedness response program, which falls under our physical well-being cluster. During the pandemic, our HTPR program conducted relief assistance, such as the provision of relief packs. We've also helped with furnishing isolation and vaccination centers. We also continue providing life support and first aid certification for DRRM responders in local government units, and support the IEC efforts for to encourage people to be vaccinated. But our HTPR program not only responds immediately to disasters, but we really advocate for preparedness, because we work with partners to ensure that communities are as disaster ready and resilient as they can be. So as part of this advocacy of preparedness, and aligned with July as National Disaster Resilience Month, we've invited a special speaker to talk about the importance of preparedness in the new normal, right? So that we are best prepared, whether it's a disaster, whether it's a pandemic. What can we do ourselves, within our families, and for our community, to be disaster ready? So we are very thankful to have our speaker here with us today. His name is Mr. Martin Aguda Jr. He is a safety, emergency management, and resilience practitioner, also author of the book Ready 101, A Guide to Urban Preparedness and Survival. He has extensive experience in corporate safety and emergency management, having been the AVP for Safety and Events of ABS-CBN Corporation from 2006 to 2013. He currently is a consultant for top corporations and various organizations throughout the country, and acts as the director of the Safety Organization of the Philippines, and is the chairman of its Disaster Resilience Division. He was the Philippine representative of the International Association of Emergency Managers, and as a safety and preparedness advocate, he also is invited to be a resource speaker for several talk shows and news in various media outfits. So we are so grateful that Sir Martin has been able to join us here today. Sir Martin, if you can turn on your camera and say hello to our audience. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. We're very excited to have you here. So how has your July been, sir, for National Disaster Resilience Month? Have you been busy, or how's it been going for you?
Yeah, hi Jackie. Again, thank you for inviting me, and it's an honor to lecture for Rafi. Yeah, you're right, no? July is the National Disaster Resilience Month, and us working in DRR, in disaster risk reduction and disaster resilience, I think this is the time that most of us should be really active in in promoting further yung disaster risk reduction as a practice and emergency preparedness for our families, Filipino families. So again, thank you, Rafi. Thank you, Jackie, for the invitation.
Again, thank you so much, Sir Martin, for being able to join us this afternoon. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get right into the meat of your presentation.
All right. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. And once again, congratulations to Rafi, Ramon Aboitiz Foundation for this Restart webinar series. And from Manila, it's rain here. Good afternoon, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Maayong hapon dyan sa Cebu. At I will do a 30 minutes lecture with the theme, Preparedness as a New Normal. So once again, it was mentioned several times that the month of July is called the National Disaster Resilience Month. Okay, before they used to call this National Disaster Consciousness Month, but pursuant to an executive order in 2017 by President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, it was changed now to Disaster Consciousness Month to Disaster Resilience Month. No, so take note of the terminologies now being used. No, July 16. What do we remember? No, with that date, July 16 is the North Luzon earthquake. It was in the afternoon, wherein you have an intensity 8 earthquake that hit several parts of northern Luzon, and that includes Baguio. No, several establishments, hotels collapsed. No, so July 16, I can remember still until now. I was still a student during that time, and I volunteered for ABS-CBN, and I was assigned to haul gallons, containers of formalin. No, yun yung assignment ko for the day when I volunteered for the repacking and hauling of goods. No, so nakita ko yung sabi ko devastation. No? I was very young then. Okay. July 16. Then starting with the start of disaster resilience month, July, Taal volcano had its phreatomagmatic eruption. Okay, and it was raised to alert level 3 by PHIVOLCS. No? So nagparamdam agad. And now here in Metro Manila, it's raining and we are at the orange level for flooding, for continuous rains. And if we will be checking the weather, we all know that we have several weather systems interacting with each other. We have the habagat and we have several weather systems. And of course, we have the threat of Delta. We know that we are still in COVID, but with the Delta cases that has been reported recently, health authorities and everyone is on alert for this Delta. So, ang tanong natin, no, are we ready? No, handa ba tayo? And and let me share now my screen to you, and I want you to introduce for a while. Okay, are you seeing my slides now? Okay, all right. As mentioned by Jackie a while ago, I authored a book called Ready 101, and I'm offering to share the gist or the summary of the contents of this Ready 101. Actually, yeah, this is my book, which I published in 2017. One of the local books available in the country. One of my motivation is that most of the books that you will see in the market, in the bookstores, are foreign books. No? So just to give preparedness, yung localized and Philippine context, I wrote this book. It's an easy to read book with the chapters READY. No? So ginamit ko ang acronym na READY. No? And I will use this also in the course of my discussion. Okay, so the first letter R stands for risk awareness. No, that will answer the question, what will happen? No? Ano ba ang mangyayari? No? So dapat masagot natin yung tanong na yon. If we can answer that question, what will happen, what can probably happen, okay, we can go to planning. So E stands for planning. Kailangan nating magplano. Okay? Ano ang plano? Base sa mga pwedeng mangyari. Alright. Then A stands for acquiring supplies. So kanina, ano ang plano? A, acquiring survival supplies or logistics. Ano ang kailangan? Diba? In disaster response, we must realize by now that the problem really when we respond to major disasters is actually logistics. No? Meron nga tayong tinatawag ng mga emergency logistician. No? The challenge really is to move relief items, emergency resources from point A to point B to your ground zero. No? How do we push resources there timely? No? So when we talk of disaster response, no, ang malaking bagay dito, and I want you to remember, is logistics. No? Think of your plan for your logistics and of course supply chain management. Now, we've been hearing the word supply chain. Meron tayong term na ginagamit na cold supply chain, no? Because we know that our vaccines should be stored in low temperatures. Okay, so for the letter A of ready, we must acquire survival supplies. But later on, I will discuss to you in yung context nito in the individual and family perspective. Then, if you can answer ano ang kailangan, ano ang dapat alam, yan, no? So drills and skills. So what are the skills that you should know and how do you practice these skills? No? So drills are practice of your plan. And the last letter Y of your READY, or ready, stands for yo-yo. Ano ba yung yo-yo? I've been using this. This is not my original. I did not coin the term yo-yo, but I've been promoting this ever since I started doing talks for preparedness. Yo-yo stands for you're on your own. Okay? After knowing what will happen, may plano, you have your logistics ready, you have your skill sets ready, and let's pray. And we must realize that in most of the scenarios, mega disasters, initially we will be on our own. Tayo muna. That's why pinaghahanda tayo. That's why we discuss about how do we prepare our go bags for our families. Ayan, no? So, okay ba tayo? I will now start with your first letter, which is your letter R. Okay, so risk awareness. Okay, risk awareness. So when we talk of risk awareness, we're talking basically of making the unknown known. We cannot plan for something that we really don't know, diba? So we know that risk can be something that we can assign numbers, no? Kaya meron tayong mga tinatawag na risk formula. That's why when you put numbers to our risk, okay, we will tell whether it's high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And we will be able to prioritize. No? And sometimes, if we are to make decisions whether to proceed with a particular activity in the context of safety, kadalasan, ang pinag-uusapan natin dito ay calculated risk. No? Sigurado ka ba na tama yung gagawin natin? No? Apart from the risk formula, no, I want you to be aware also of the lessons learned. No? Ito kadalasan nakakalimutan natin. Malinaw na that it happened in other countries, and yet we fail to learn or remember the lessons learned. Kaya nga gusto ko palagi yung nakikita ko pag may celebration yung 9/11, di ba? Never forget. Yan. Dapat ganyan, never forget the lessons learned. And I call this in my book, disaster preview. Okay? And aside from these previews, it's not enough that we just put in there flooding, intensity 8 earthquake, signal number 5. No, it's not enough that we put this hazards, no, or mga disaster events, no. It is important also that we learn how to create the scenarios. Ano ba ang mangyayari? Pag lumindol, ano ba ang mangyayari? Okay? Pagka tinamaan tayo ng COVID-19 Delta variant, ano ba ang mangyayari? So these are scenarios. These are stories, no? These are pictures, clear pictures of what could happen. So you anticipate that. Meron makikita diyan MLS, which stands for the most likely scenario. Yan yung kadalasan ginagawa natin sa mga drills, di ba? Masusunog, may mag-evacuate, may tatalon, may magra-rappelling. These are most likely scenarios. But what are the worst case scenarios for a fire? Building collapse, di ba? See in the US, no? Yung nangyari sa isang condo in the US. Worst case scenarios. Okay, there are most likely scenarios and there are worst case scenarios that we can also prepare. Okay. All right. By this time, okay, for people attending here who has attended the DRR training workshops, no? And of course, siguro yung mga safety officers natin dito, you'd be able to differentiate easily the term hazard and risk. No, hazard is something that has potential to harm you. In that example, particular example, the hazard is the shark. Okay? Okay. But if you jump into the water, into the ocean, okay, you have a risk of being bitten or eaten by the shark. Okay? So hazard is different from the risk. Okay? Risk is the likelihood of that harm, of that hazard causing the harm. No? So dapat alam na natin yan, ha? Yung mga may previous lectures on DRR. The presence of a volcano is not a disaster risk itself, but it is a hazard. Okay, you have hydrometeorological hazards, you have geological hazards, okay, and so on and so forth. When we talk of the disaster formula, that we know that disaster risk, okay, ito po yung disaster formula natin, is your hazard, which is natural hazard or human-induced hazard. No, dapat tama na yung term na ginagamit natin ngayon. No, I'm very particular with the terms now. No, it's your typhoon, the wind, the speed, the earthquake magnitude. Okay, it's the health hazard, which is SARS-CoV-2, no, which is the virus that ito yung tawag mo sa virus. Okay, SARS-CoV-2. Yun yung health hazard, yun yung biohazard. Okay. Then hazard times the exposure times vulnerability. Exposure can be physical, geographical exposure to the hazard. And we all know that the Philippines, based on its geographical location, is located in the Ring of Fire, and we are also the exporter of typhoons. So mapalindol, we are in the Ring of Fire, and mapa hydrometeorological hazards, katabi natin ang Pacific Ocean where most of the typhoons are born or generated. Then another element of your disaster risk is your vulnerability. These are the gaps. These are the factors that increase susceptibility to the hazards. May kulang dyan. Alam ko, hinahanap nyo. Ano yung denominator? Yung denominator dyan is your capacity. Yan. Yung capacity, that it is the things that you do, no, to be able to manage the disaster event or the emergency. No, kanina in the videos, we have heard this, that this is called your 4 thematic areas, or in the US it's called the emergency management cycle. You have your mitigation, prevention, then preparedness, then you respond, then recover and rehabilitate, then the cycle continues. Okay. Yan. In safety management, occupational safety and health, we use now the element of risk. no, as a factor, no? So ginagamit na rin yung risk. So ang OSH ngayon uses the hierarchy model, which is hazard identification, risk analysis, and controls. Ayan. Okay? So now we identify the risk. So dati, bakit sasabi natin disaster management? In the 70s, pag sinabi ng disaster management, when we talk of landslides, no, takbo ka na mabilis. Para hindi ka abutan ng landslide, no? Preparedness lang, no? But when we talk of disaster risk reduction, the risk is identified. Okay? In the first place, dapat wala ka diyan. In the first place, dapat wala ka diyan sa mountains. Okay? High risk 'yan. Okay? So wala ka diyan. So we identify the risk and take the people out of harm's way, no? So that is a difference now. Dati you just run, now you should not be there. 'Yun ang konsepto nun. And when it comes to hazard identification, okay, I just want to emphasize lang to everyone that in hazard identification, it is important also that we use the all hazards approach. And what is the all hazards approach? Meaning, when we are asked in our risk assessment to list all of the hazards there, no, typhoon, fire, bombing, kidnapping, etc., no, in your list, no, make sure that all of the potential hazards, natural, human-induced, technological, mga aksidente na ganyan, no? And I would remember, and this is a confession, that when I do lectures like this, no, sasabihin mo yung pandemic, no, but dadaanan mo lang siya. Okay? Yan. So all hazards approach, make sure that you don't miss anything there. But of course, kaya meron kang risk assessment, you want to prioritize what are the hazards first on the top priority that you will do some interventions. Okay. Have you heard of the black swan and the gray rhino? Okay. Narinig nyo na ba itong terminology na to? These are actually terminologies used by authors. Sabi nung may mga lumabas na articles that COVID-19 is a black swan. What is a black swan? Wala namang black swan eh. Di ba? Bihira. Nakakita na ba kayo ng black swan? So, black swan are rare events but will impact you. Okay? Rare events that will impact you. But hindi ba natin nakita na may mga pandemic na even in 1918 siguro masyado nang malayo yon. Ngayon lang natin nalaman na may pandemic pala noong 1918 na ganito yung impact sa atin. But we have the SARS in 2002, 2003. We have the H1N1. Okay? So, nakita na natin yan. Ang problema lang, okay, we ignore. Okay? So, hindi siya black swan. Sabi nilang mga authors on risk management, it's a gray rhino. Yung gray rhino, the rhino is color gray, no? Nasa harap mo na, malaki. But we fail to ignore. Hindi natin alam kung ano ang gagawin natin. So, COVID-19 is a gray rhino. It's an obvious threat, but we fail to act on something. So, yari ka sa gray rhino when it charges you if you don't act immediately. So, parang eto na naman tayo. Etong delta na to. Sabihin, black swan ba to? It's a gray rhino because it is in front of us now, galit na galit, and ready to charge us. So it will be up to us whether pag lumusob yan, we will act accordingly. Okay, so I hope you got something there. You can research about this black swan and gray rhinos in your assessments. Of course, pandemics, okay, sabi nila, pandemics are your gray rhinos. High impact events. Okay, and we know, just like to emphasize also this, that in handling pandemics, we must use science, data, and facts. No? Wala namang bago when we manage also and analyze, do our risk assessments for natural disasters. So science-based, risk-based, sinasabi natin. No? But in our modern world that we have this infodemic and fake news, alternative facts, we must be discerning, no? So we will be able to use the science, data, and facts in doing our management. One of the gray rhinos, I may say, is climate change and global warming. Palaging sinasabi, but are we doing aggressively steps to address climate change? No, and the obvious effects of climate change, of course, are extremes of weather. Then with melting of the ice and drought and extremes ng mga typhoons. Okay. Okay. So you have now the term hazard, the risk. Okay. Here in Metro Manila in 2004, okay, with the study of JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, with MMD and PHIVOX, they have made this study saying, oy, may big one dyan sa Metro Manila, sa NCR. And based on modeling, there will be a 7.2 magnitude earthquake when the 90-kilometer stretch of the West Valley Fault will move. And it will render an intensity 8 earthquake with a 7.2 magnitude. Ilan ang mamamatay? 33,500 to 50,000. Ilan ang babagsak na buildings? The scenario, the picture has been painted. And this is the basis, actually, why we have this earthquake drills quarterly, as organized by DRRM and Office of Civil Defense. No? Started, actually, dito sa threat of the big one. And the threat stands. No? God forbid that it will happen. And with the risk, sabi ko kanina, pwede mo siyang calculate, pwede mo siyang sabihin high risk, low risk, medium risk ka. And I want you to do an assignment after this lecture. Go to Hazard Hunter PH. Identify your risk, natural hazards, I mean. Okay, and you'll be able to find out whether you are in high risk area or low risk area. Okay. What is now the difference between risk and uncertainty? Ayan, dami ko mga contrast na sinasabi sa inyo. No? Risk, okay, is something that is measurable. Uncertainty is something that you cannot measure. So with risk, we can prioritize, we can assign numbers based on theoretical modeling. But uncertainty, these are scenarios. And I want you, okay, ito yan, no? So risk, you make decisions for which the outcome is not known with certainty, but you can list the possible outcomes. Okay, and assign probabilities to the outcomes. Okay? So kaya mong sabihin ano yung mga posibleng mangyari at mag-assign ka ng probability na mangyayari ba yan. Kaya, okay? Uncertainty, on the other hand, you cannot list all the possible outcomes, and you cannot assign probabilities to the outcomes. And I would just like to say that it's not enough that we identify the risk, because the disaster event, no, maaring may risk assessment tayo, but we cannot really determine the uncertainty. For example, okay, we have risk assessment for COVID-19. Okay, we can do that. We can do some risk assessment, but the uncertainty that comes with the pandemic, like pag tumama ang Delta variant sa atin, there are so many uncertainties. Marami tayong hindi masasagot. No, marami tayong hindi natin makikita yung mga outcomes agad. These are examples of your uncertainty. That's why we need now to imagine or do our disaster imagination. And then I'd like to borrow this term used by frequently in the lectures of Yusek Rene Solidum of DOST PHIVOX, na sinasabi niya, disaster imagination. We must imagine scenarios. Now, with Albert Einstein saying imagination is more important than the knowledge. Okay, in imagining scenarios, sabi ko kanina, there are most likely scenarios and there are worst case scenarios. Minsan yung mga worst case, kaya in my work as a preparedness advocate, sinasabi, ano naman, alarmists, kaming mga preppers, no? Preppers are people who really take preparedness seriously. Some others to the extreme. Okay, but I'm a practical prepper. No, so I think of the most likely scenario and worst case scenario. Yung worst case scenario naman, hindi naman out of this world na most case scenario, di ba? Kaya minsan nasasabi na mga siraulo itong mga alarmists, mga to sobra-sobra na. But it is a product of course, research and modeling and some theories. Okay. Okay. There are times that you don't even need to do imagination, no? Nakita mo na. So I will call this now disaster preview. I use the term disaster preview in my book as an offshoot of the term disaster imagination. Yung disaster preview, ang nakakainis dito, nangyari na yan. And one of the things there is that eto, no? You can call this now, itong 9/11, as black swan events, no? Wala namang nakaisip that airplanes can be used as a missile and even to collapse buildings, no? So masabi mong black swan 'yan. Okay? Kasi wala sa consciousness ng mga security, safety and crisis managers that pwede pala 'yon until it happened. So it can be classified as a black swan event, no? Another black swan event and that we can get lessons learned is the 2011, March 11, 2011. Ano yan? Okay, the Japan earthquake that caused the meltdown of the Fukushima power plant. Who would imagine, no, Japan as an advanced country with all this technology and safety, no, and disaster response, hindi pa nila kaya na-anticipate yon. Yung mga redundancies doon nag-fail actually. There are several redundancies, but it failed actually, no? So you might want to read on that also. So yung disaster preview, nakita na natin malinaw na nangyari. Ngayon, bakit tayo kailangan mag-imagine, no? So going now to our present and imminent threat in our country. Okay, we enjoyed siguro for the past month na restrictions were lifted, no? Yung iba nakakalabas na, nare-restart na yung ibang business, nagba-bounce back na yung economic activity. Then we have the threat of the Delta variant. So what can happen? Okay, so ulit tayo lumayo. Tignan na lang natin what happened in India. Okay, see how they dispose dead bodies, how they burn their dead bodies. Ang tanong dito, do we have enough cremation facilities if it happened to us? So again, this is the worst case scenario. Okay? Then, nakita natin anong paging problema. Shortage, overwhelmed ang healthcare facilities. Okay? Kulang ng hospital beds, kulang ng oxygen. Ayan. Do we have now part of our planning to ensure that we have adequate supplies of oxygen tanks and oxygen refilling stations when it hit us? Okay? So, again, these are previews. Diba? And sana, wag na tayong lumayo, nakikita na natin. All we have to do, open your laptops, your computers, then do research. Okay? Then last, sa letter R, is creating your own disaster movie, and I want you to do this as an assignment. Okay, just let me check my time. Make your own disaster movie. Okay, and make sure that the movie, when you get out of the danger zone, you survive and thrive, and you survive happily ever after. Ikaw na lang gagawa ng movie mo, ikaw ang director, ikaw ang actor. Dapat buhay ka. Okay, the next is letter E. Ano ang gagawin? What is your plan? And the basic plan actually is to survive. Okay? Survive the initial impact. Okay? And after the initial impact, you survive and then you thrive until you recover fully. That is the plan. Mabuhay. Yun yung plano natin. Mabuhay. You survive the initial impact and you're able to thrive. We are thriving through this COVID crisis. Hopefully, hindi tayo malagay sa casualties. Okay? That is basically our plan. Okay? And when we talk of surviving the initial impact, no? In your pre-departure orientation sa aircraft, okay, the flight attendant will tell us that in case of emergency, okay, this is the procedure. Okay, pag magka-crash ang aeroplano, sabihin niya, brace, 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 head down, stay down. Brace, brace, brace. Head down, stay down. Okay? This is the posture body position wherein since curled ang body mo, less ang contact or less ang possible contact with the flying debris, with the maleta na loose objects that will be flying all over during the crash landing. So the goal here is to survive the initial impact. It's not a promise that you will not get hurt, but it's the only way, okay, for us to survive the impact. Same goes with the duck cover and hold procedure. Okay, that duck over and hold is basically not for collapsed structures but falling debris. Okay. Okay. Most of us would do our Facebook Live even before thinking of surviving. No, when we survive, okay, when we survive the initial impact, you have to do this: either you evacuate or stay in place. Okay? So evacuation is done when the place you are in is will further kill you or injure you. So kailangan umalis in case of fire, earthquake, bombing, etc. Get out of the kill zone, get out of the danger zone. Or if the situation outside is dangerous and safer than the inside, then you do reverse evacuation, lockdown. Okay, mas delikado sa labas, so dito tayo sa loob ng bahay. This is what we did for the past months. Nag-lockdown tayo. Ang tawag dyan, reverse evacuation. What are other situations, no? When there will be a possible chemical, biological, nuclear attack, no? Yung CBRN, chemical, biological, radiologic, nuclear attack, weapons of mass destruction. Ang sinasabi dyan, shelter in place. Do not go outside. Seal your windows and doors. Stay there. Okay? Yan. Have you watched the movie San Andreas? Okay. Okay. So you have San Andreas Fault in California. What we learned here is that you should have family emergency planning, and part of your plans actually is you make sure that you'll be able to reunite, no? Tawag yan, family reunification plan. No, if the earthquake will happen daytime, kakahiwalay kayo, okay? How will you reunite with your family members, your kids in school, others in office? Okay, ano ang reunification plan nyo? Okay, but now in COVID, magkakasama tayo sa bahay because work from home, most all of us, and then the kids are in the house also. Okay, this is not an issue for now. Okay, then along with that will be your communications and point of contact plan. We are dependent highly on technology. Pagka bumagsak ang communications during a disaster event, signal number 5, earthquake, wadop yan lahat. Okay? Then you have your short-term survival plans, backout plans. Backout plans is when you decide to go somewhere out of the hot zone or danger zone. No? Gaya ng ginawa ng government during Yolanda, wherein they flew some of the survivors from Yolanda to Manila to be taken care of here temporarily. No? So you get out of the hot zone. So you need some family emergency planning. Sa pamilya nyo, mag-usap-usap kayo, di ba? In our work, meron tayong mga fire brigade team, merong fire extinguisher team, may medical team, okay? may evacuation team. Ganun din. Sa bahay, sa pamilya, mag-assign who will do initial firefighting, who will evacuate important things, who will call the fire department, who will alert the guards, etc. Okay? You can do that over dinner, over a meal, then you can simulate, you can do a drill. Okay? So this is the family reunification plan that we saw in the movie what's this movie? San Andreas. Okay? So for the new normal plans, okay? For the new normal plans, again, akala natin tapos na tayo dito, but we have to revisit all of this. Okay? So if you intend to travel across borders now, I think may mga pronouncements na ang government, ang DILG, that there will be mobility and travel restrictions. So you might want to check on that. You might want to check your plans. Okay? For those preparing to go back to work, baka hindi pa, work from home pa rin tayo. Health and safety protocols, it might be strict again. Lockdown plan, pag naulit yan, na mag-lockdown, hindi ba tayo natuto? Again, use the principles that I've told you. Huwag nyo naisip, mag-lockdown ba? Palaging ganyan, no? For the past 2 days, dahil I post in social media the possibility of the devastation of Delta variant here. People are asking me, mag-lockdown ba? Huwag mo nang tanongin kung mag-lockdown, maghanda ka na lang. Dahil we have seen how lockdowns are declared here. O sa gabi, i-announce yan, lockdown na bukas, no? Something like that, no? So nakita na natin yung mga scenario. So dapat natuto na tayo, and we have learned from that. Okay. I won't dwell on this much, but I just want to mention here, this is used in management, in problem solving and decision making, that there are emergency cases, there are incidents that is clear and simple. In color blue, kung nakikita niyo dyan sa mga screens nyo. Ma-sense natin, there's a fire, then makategorize natin, it's a small fire, you respond, you can use a fire extinguishers. These are your good practices. No? Sabihin, SOPs na yan. Standard operating procedures. Okay? Just like to move fast forward, most of the time, or there are instances that emergency situations, disaster situations are complex and chaotic, wherein you don't know really what to do, no? With the pandemic na nabigla tayo lahat, sometimes we just sabihin lockdown muna, okay? And there are many innovations that we have seen in terms of response, no? Pagdating dito. So during complex and chaotic situations, the response is actually to act at once. There you have your innovations, okay? Kaya nga makikita nyo palagi interim COVID-19 plans. Puro interim eh. But while we learn many things now about the enemy, about COVID, okay, it becomes now as a best practice, okay? So ito rin gusto ipakita sa inyo. Then A stands for acquiring supplies. Yung go bag natin, kaya sinasabi yan, prepare food and water for the next 3 days because this is the modern day survival scenario. 3 days. Sabi ng Amerika, sabi ng Federal Emergency Management ng US, sa citizens nila, prepare for food for at least 3 days. 3 days lang, ha? Mayabang, no? 3 days na dyan na kami. Dyan na yung tulong. Okay? Kaya minimum for preparing contents of your go bag in terms of food and water, for your supplies is at least 3 days. Kasi yun ang promise sa kanila. But let's now contextualize this. Let's localize the plan. Gano'n ba katagal? Baka hindi lang 3 days. No? Nakita na natin yan. Maaring 1 week minimum. 5 to 7 days. Okay? So yan ang ating time frame that we should work with. Okay? This is what you call your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. No? I just put this here for us to prioritize. Ano ba yung mga kailangan nandyan na importante para mabuhay tayo. Of course, this is you have your food, water, shelter, which are your physiological needs. Safety is next, no? But modified, sabi nila, Wi-Fi daw and battery. Patutunayan ko yan. Kahit gutom na gutom ka na, you have your physiologic need. Pag upo mo sa restaurant, imbis na menu ang hingin mo ang Wi-Fi password, no? So nakakamiss mag-dine in. And also, you have to consider yung rules of threes when it comes to survival. You need 3 minutes without air, you die. 3 hours without shelter, hypothermia in extreme environment. 3 days without water, you die. 3 weeks without food, you die. So, napaka-importante dito is 3 days without water. So, importante palagi, meron kang imbak na tubig. Ako, I always carry a liter of water with me. Kahit saan kaabutan, ma-pin down ka, after an earthquake, you have water. And there are stories that they drink their urine for them to survive. And you survive for 3 weeks even without food as long as you have water, no? So yung mga healthy magsusurvive, yung mga sexy mauuna kayo. Okay. And there are layering principles, meaning redundancy. Meron kang bit-bit, everyday carry, which is nasa bulsa mo. So ako, ang nasa bulsa ko everyday, of course, aside from my cell phone, you have my flashlight, no? You have your, of course, house keys. You have your chargers, etc. You can do multi-tool. Kumbaga, kung meron kayong kikay kit, meron kayong match kit. Yan. Then you have your go bags. Your go bag is for evacuation. Then another layer is that you have your stockpile. I will discuss later on. I will not discuss the contents of your go bags. You can research this. There are must-haves na nandyan dapat. Okay? You can just research. And I would suggest also that you don't buy outright na yung ready go bag. I want you to assemble based on your personal needs. Now, this is one that I shared with CNN Philippines years back. No? Ito yung mga recommended ko. You can just research. And based on my scenario building, may disaster imagination, may tinatawag tayong meron akong tinatawag na bedside survival kit. These are some survival items that is beside me just in case may earthquake. I'm living 50 meters away from the fault line. Wala akong magawa. So I have my leather gloves, my tactical pants ready, and my shoes ready, and my flashlight, my whistle. Aside from the go bag, which is also near me. No, but these are your 3 minutes. These are my near person gear, as I call it. Okay. So aside from your go bag, dapat meron kayong impact. You call this your stockpile. No. And in the context of COVID preparation, pandemic preparation, actually ito nakatulong sa akin because I have my food stockpile for at least 1.5 to 2 months. No, so kahit mag-lockdown sila dyan, I'm not threatened because I know, okay, when groceries will be closed on yung initial na lockdown, I'll be able to survive, no, for at least 1.5 months to 2 months, no, kung titipirin. But of course, it didn't happen. Bukas pa rin naman ng mga groceries. But yun sinasabi ko, if there are lessons from basic disaster preparedness lessons for that applies to pandemic, ito yun, no? When you are preparing for these scenarios, mga lockdown na yan, pag meron kang supply with you, kaya hindi ka kakabahan, no? Of course, you have water requirements, kay 1 gallon per person per day. Kaya nga mura lang, di ba? You can stockpile. So 1 gallon per person per day, yung isang lalagyan is 5 gallons, meaning kung meron kang isang ganyan na extra for yourself, 5 days ka, 5 to 7 days or more ka mabubuhay having one blue container. So if you are 5 in your family, you should have 5 of that na naka-standby lang. Okay? But there are other means na yung boiling, di ba, chemical disinfection, sabi nila betadine and Clorox, you can do that, no? So don't do this, okay? May formula yan. 1 liter, 4 drops, then 30 minutes, stand down before you drink it. Okay? Store food that you like to eat, no? Yung isa-store mo, ikaw ang kakain yan. So store food that if you like Spam, then stockpile Spam. Okay? Nakakatawa in other countries, they stockpile toilet paper. But yeah, I stockpile toilet paper. Pag nawalan ng, sometimes we think of just the food that we eat. Kung may input, may output yan. Nakakalimutan natin. Sometimes if there's no water, there you go. No, meron kang toilet papers. Okay. Kung nakita natin yung ayuda stockpile natin ngayon, dapat yan yung i-keep mo. You keep that amount of stockpile of food now during these uncertain times of the pandemic. Okay. Okay, of course, first aid kit, you have your PPEs, okay, you have your communication systems, mag-ipon ng kuryente, okay, then digitized personal files. Okay, let's go to drills. So I'll finish in a bit. Okay, drills and skills, no? So first aid, okay, ang first aid ngayon, break down na into several techniques. Meron na CPR lang. So sabi nga nila, kung natatakot kayo mag-mouth-mouth, hands-only CPR na lang. No, for the active shooter scenarios naman sa Amerika, dahil maraming takot sa dugo, ayaw mag-control ng bleeding, meron silang ginawang program, Stop the Bleed training program. Ang tinuturo lang doon is how to control major bleeding in case of mga bombings, active shooters, etc. Okay? Of course, we should reorient ourselves with the basic immediate action drills. What to do, the cover and hold, crawl low under the smoke for children, evacuation, and drills are tests of your plans. Okay? So tandaan natin yan. Kaya sabi nila natin na practice makes perfect, but I'd like to modify that a bit. Perfect practice makes perfect, no? Baka mamaya ito yung ginagawa natin. Ako kung tatanungin mo ko, this is wrong. Okay? You should have situational awareness. Alam mo kung may babagsak sa yung puno, hindi mo nakikita dahil can your head be saved by the book that is covering your head? Okay? So perfect practice makes perfect. Try to recalibrate that. Katulad ko siguro, okay, earthquake drill sila imbis na mag-cover yung head, no? Humihingi ng McDonald's. Yung isa naman tinitignan kung malakas yung shaking ng tubig. Doon. All right. And with drills, try to remember a drill. A drill, a mechanical drill or electrical drill is there to punch holes, no? So during drills and practices, you need to reevaluate your emergency plans. Some of the plans na naisip mo might not work. So punch holes, no? Kaya nga during drills, you have observers to make comments, suggestions. Okay? One of the drills that families can do actually, and we can do now, is to do staycation and glamping. Sa bahay lang kayo, patayin yung ilaw. Okay? Patayin yung ilaw. Okay? You can use your emergency lights. I would discourage the use of candles, ha? But gamitin nyo yung whatever na pinaghandaan nyo during typhoons. No? You can do a simulation. No? Staycation and camping is a good drill, no, for families right now. And why? Is you're on your own. Okay, so you're on your own, parang very selfish, no? But the concept of you're on your own is that you're on your own for a while. Kaya nga sinasabi 72 hours preparedness. I would go back to this movie, San Andreas the movie. No, si Dwayne Johnson is a helicopter rescuer and a pilot, no, of a rescue chopper. Ang ginawa niya, inuna niya ang pamilya niya bago siya nag-rescue ng iba. Collateral na lang na may na-rescue siyang iba. So that is the reality. Okay, we will prioritize our loved ones, our families. So yun yung minsan cause ng delays. Okay, so responders will take care of their families first. Okay, and I would say that during the yo-yo scenario, it's important also that you have your mindset. Survival is 90% mental. Your will to survive is always there. Okay, and as I end, and this is the last quote from in my book, no? Sabi ko dito, it's easier die than to survive. Napagpatay ka na, wala ka nang iniisip. But when you're alive, you think of how to thrive, how to survive in the next days, in the next hours, in the next days, in the next weeks, based on the scenario. And ito yung iisipin natin ngayon with this COVID pandemic and with the threat of Delta. Okay, and it's written in the book of Genesis that the first disaster manager actually is Noah in Noah's Ark. Noah built the ark when it was not raining. Okay? And the question that I want to throw to you as I end my lecture, there are two questions. Ready ka na ba? Ready ka na ba? May natutunan ka ba ngayon? O ready ka na kay Lord? Ayan. So with that, maraming salamat po. And I will be open for some questions and comments. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Sir Martin. No, that was a very, very informative presentation with a lot of real life examples, no, that I think the viewers will be able to relate to. So we have time for just a few questions, sir. The first being, no, is what are the most important items now in the new normal to include in a disaster supply kit? No, so I think, you know, you went over some of the basics like first aid, food, water, but considering the situation now with COVID-19 pandemic, what do you think are additional must-haves in each of the disaster kits?
All right. So, and I think everyone knows the answer now. You have to have a supply of masks, diba? So in your go bags, when you use your go bags for evacuation, when you're asked to go to an evacuation area, don't wait for people there in the disaster response team to hand over masks. Diba dapat meron ka ng supply or box of masks, diba? So meron ka na dapat yan. Yan na yung idadagdag mo. Then you have supply of alcohol. Okay? And if face shields are used and are required, you should have extras of this face shield. So ito yung mga natutunan, hindi lang for go bags. These are everyday carry items, no? Na dapat meron tayo. In my car, I keep a box of masks all the time, several boxes of face shields just in case, di ba? Makalimutan mo. Ito na yung everyday carry ng new normal. And ito na yung dagdag na item natin in our go bags.
Okay, so PPEs no for personal and your family's use. There's another interesting question here, sir. No, it's talking about how do we enhance a culture of preparedness within the family, especially if money is a concern, right? No, so if our budget is limited, like how do we navigate that? Because not all of us might not be able to afford, to stockpile for 1 week's worth of food. What would your suggestions be for that, sir?
Yeah. Okay. First, you go through the process. In discussing preparedness with your family, we discuss the imperatives. Ano ba ang mangyayari? Ano ang paghandaan? So, paint a scenario. Then, instead of first focusing on the supplies that will entail cost, di ba? Ano muna, how do we survive the impact? So go to the skills first, di ba? Yun na muna. Then, because all you want, your plan actually is to survive the initial impact. No? So, pag na-imbibe na sa kanila, the end goal is to survive. No? Buhay ka dapat. Buhay ka dapat. Then, slowly, you can build up. There must be a system, actually, when you build up your supplies. No? For example, if you buy just 2 canned goods every week, dagdagan ng isa, diba? So it's really hard to talk about having extras for those existing ng hand to mouth, no? But meron akong mga nakita na who have done wonderful initiatives in preparedness na hindi sila nag-concentrate doon sa what extras they should have, but merong plano and may deliberate plan talaga, no? So baka otherwise talaga magtitipid ka, no? Dapat deliberate yung plan natin. Some at ito lang nakikita ko in my years of response naman. First day, second day, nanghihingi na ng tulong. Yung mga middle class families yun, dumadaan yung rubber boat namin. Nalala ko, wala pa kayong stockpile man lang. Some kasi, instead of selling, I have to eat siguro twice a day na lang dahil survival situation. Other people, dahil magkakasama sa bahay, nag-party-party pa, inubos lahat ng supply. Diba? So, yung mindset na nasa survival mode kayo. So there must be some adjustment. Instead of eating 3 full meals, instead of eating 2 meriendas, 2 meals na lang a day. And hindi mo alam kasi kailan darating, kailan mag-normalize ang situation, kailan darating ang relief, no? So mindsets also are very important. So it's an interplay actually of mindset, systems, and of course some logistics, no? And you can build logistics over time. Okay, for those who can afford naman, di ba? Every time, extra pair of batteries. No, kahit hindi mo kailangan, okay, kahit wala ka pang panggagamitan, di ba? You just buy batteries, di ba? Pagka mayroon ng isang nag-conk na item na kailangan ng battery. Pero ako hindi, bibili ako ng extra palagi. So you build your supply, your stockpile, no? It can take years for you to have stockpiles, and you will be surprised na meron na pala. It's not an overnight thing that you prepare everything. Of course, no? Wala, mahirap yun.
Correct. And I think, sir, what's important to highlight from what you said is that preparedness is much more than a disaster kit, right? That's only one part of it. It's really the skill set, it's having the plan, which require no cost. So your suggestion is you start with the plan, you start with having the skill set, the mindset to survive, right? And over time you can build up your stock. No, okay, not all of us can just go and build our disaster kit outright, but to begin with the planning, the preparation in that sense. So going beyond the disaster kit. I also have another question here, sir. It's how can I prepare to help my family members who will need more help? Considering that We might live in households with people with special needs, or maybe there are senior citizens, or maybe young children. What can you suggest, to take into consideration so that our planning is inclusive?
Yes, very good question. So part of your risk assessment is identifying who are the vulnerable persons or individuals, diba? So you have your PWDs, mga bedridden, those who need assistance in their mobilities. They should be part of the plan. Even your pets, actually, diba? So that's the correct term. Dapat inclusive yung plano. At siguro yung plano natin, the plan should be deliberate to the point really that you just don't say na idadaan namin sa bintana o sa window, no? Sometimes kaya nga meron tayong drills that the drills is intended really to practice your plan, no? Kahit man walk through lang or imagination lang. Kakasya ba yung bed sa window? O kakasya ba yung tao sa window? Okay? So that's very correct. That's very accurate. It's imperative that we determine yung most vulnerable and give them priority to doon sa ating plans. These are special needs kung tawagin. So if you have infants, you have your infant formula as part of your go bag. If you have sick people that would have maintenance medications, dapat meron ka dahil pag nagsara ang butika, nag-close, di ba? Nag-close ang commercial establishments, saan ka pupunta para to buy their medication? So dapat may extra. So again, when they are part of your planning, again, it will all follow the skills again. You walk, ganun ulit, babalik ka ulit. Ano dapat meron? Ano dapat skills? Ano dapat ipapractice natin dito? Etc. Sino magtutulak ng wheelchair? Sino magbubuhat? Kaya bang buhatin? Di ba? Okay. So these are drills. This can be done by doing drills. Minsan actual drills to the point na you will be confident that your plans will work.
Correct. No, so it's really another factor to consider when making your plans. And sir, so I have one last question. No, so a lot of people, or there's this belief, that Filipinos are inherently resilient. No, this gets thrown around a lot. No, that we have this quality to our culture where we are very resilient. So my question for you is, what you think about this, and if you agree, what do you think is our best practice, or what do you think is something within the Filipino spirit that makes us inherently resilient?
All right. Contrary to that, no, there are articles that I have read that while we see Filipinos doing TikTok while in the flood, while in the pandemic, okay, and they equate that with resilience, sometimes it's not also good because this is an excuse of those in authority for their failures. No, ay resilient naman kayo, kayang-kaya nyo yan, di ba? Okay. So if a personal answer to that, okay, resilience means bouncing back better, di ba? Okay. BBB, bouncing back better, madaling makabangon. Kaya nga from the term natin na disaster risk reduction, some agencies, some organizations uses now disaster resilience. No, even in the private sector, we use organizational resilience. No, previously we just use disaster preparedness, etc. No, but resilience will cover yung bouncing back better. It's not just responding to the emergency, but preparing. You can bounce back better if you have prepared really a lot. With Filipinos being resilient, yeah, it's inherent in us na masiyahin tayo. Siguro on the other hand, sanay din tayo sa hirap, di ba? Compared to other first world countries that when they experience hardships, sa kanila malaking bagay na 'yon, no? But while we have that inherent resilience, no, yung lakas ng loob, I think it should not be used also in the wrong context by being an excuse for those in charge to take care of us not to act appropriately.
Okay, sir. So thank you so much. And for my very last question, I'll ask you something that we ask to all of our speakers on the Restart series. No, it's after your whole presentation today. If you could have one takeaway message for the viewers here today, the most important message you'd like to get across, what would it be?
Okay. Uh, in my letter R part, which is risk awareness, okay, it's not enough just to identify or state the incident or the hazard or the disaster event. Use your imagination, okay. Ang takeaway ko siguro, takeaway in terms of an activity tonight, okay, when you sleep, what is the worst case scenario that can happen? Pagka nagka-earthquake, when you're lying in bed, no, patay ang ilaw, planning will start from there. Okay? Use your imagination. Make a disaster movie. And at the end of that movie, make sure that you're alive. Why? Because you are the scriptwriter, you are the director, you are the actor. Why would you want to die? You should be alive. Ikaw dapat ang sikat. If at the end of the movie, your disaster movie, in your imagination, you're dead, then you have to rewrite your script. Make sure that you're alive. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. I think that's a really nice piece of advice, no, to something for all of us to do later on, no, is to assess and to really plan, make your own disaster movie. That's a really creative way to put it. So again, Sir Martin, I would like to thank you so much on behalf of Rafi, no, for sharing with us your knowledge just in time for July as National Disaster Resilience Month. I think there was a lot of information that we could take away from this, a lot of things that we can start today in order to be more prepared. So we really appreciate the time you took, Sir Martin, and we hope that you're okay there in Manila. I heard it's raining, no? So please take care. In Bisaya, we say amping, no? In Tagalog, ingat. So wishing you a good rest of the day, sir, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Martin. So this pandemic has forced us all to change and adapt in many aspects, but Sir Martin's presentation today has given us insight on what we as individuals can do to make sure that we ourselves, our families, and our communities are prepared for any disaster or emergency that comes our way. So to celebrate July as National Disaster Resilience Month, you can take action now and help. One way to do so is helping our communities more disaster resilient by donating a tree, right? So trees play an important role in disaster mitigation in both upland and coastal areas. And you can help reforest our most vulnerable communities by donating a tree through our 123 tree growing program. So for every tree that you donate, you are not only helping the environment by reforesting it, right, and helping fight climate change, but you are also supporting our partner communities who grow them and ensure their survival. So please consider donating a tree for less than 100 pesos. We'll share a link to our 123 Facebook page and website down below in the comments. No, that's just one thing you can do to ensure that our communities are more disaster resilient. But aside from that, I think Sir Martin also gave us a lot of tips on how we can ensure that we are prepared and that our families are also prepared as we move forward, right, in this pandemic. So thank you for joining today's session. We hope that it provided some good insight. If you haven't already, you can like and follow the Rafi Facebook page to stay up to date with updates from our other programs and tips to be more disaster ready if you're interested in this kind of thing. So we will also have a sneak peek of our next video that will be coming up. So you'll see that towards the end of the webinar. So in line with Rafi's vision of touching people and shaping the future, we hope that our session today has made you more aware of what you can do amidst this pandemic and how we can move forward confidently into the new normal. So thank you so much for joining, and remember to stay safe.
Thank